So the word wonder, I want to start by asking you to close your eyes. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to rob anything. It's okay. And I want you to think visually, what is the first thing that you see when I say the word wonder? You can open them now. Any brave people want to tell me? Yes.
My child.
Your what?
My child.
Your child. Okay, anyone else?
A cloud.
A cloud. You, sir?
Family and beach.
Family and beach, that's beautiful. Anyone else?
Stars.
Stars. Okay. So what I did when I was asked to speak is I obviously went onto social media, right? Because that's what you do. And I asked people, what does the word wonder mean to you? And the first response I got was from my lovely sister saying, I wonder how you got so lucky to have me as your sister. So she just called me before when I was outside and she goes, I'll go on speakerphone if you'd like so I can explain how lucky you really are. Thankfully, I said no. Sorry. She would have taken over the talk. She's 6 years older, so you know. The next one, that energy that keeps you going, pushing, and grinding, followed by a magical combination of awe and curiosity, which I love. My favorite, being open to the experience of not knowing every effing thing. Obviously a designer. The next step is, okay, so let's go into the world of knowledge and the world of history. And unfortunately, they were all old white dudes. First one, Aristotle said, wisdom begins in wonder, which I 100% agree with. We then go on to the lovely dad of capitalism, Adam Smith, who said that wonder arises when something quite new and singular is presented, and memory cannot, from all its stores, cast up any image that nearly resembles its strange appearance. Now, just for him, the next slide, because he got a little dramatic and passionate, if you can read it, that is the Mexican Sacred Heart of the Virgen de Guadalupe. So thank you, Adam Smith, for capitalism. The last is the gentleman that gave us cogito ergo sum. Does anyone know who that is? No? I think, therefore I am. Mr. Dickau, and he's from Switzerland. But this one really is, wonderment is the first passion of all. Those without any natural inclination to this passion are ordinarily very ignorant. So, no offense, but off we go. So it appears thus far that what we can assume is that wonder is in conflict. It's when we encounter something that's completely in conflict in what we expect. Would you guys agree with that? You all of a sudden stop and you think, whoa, what is that? And so I love this picture of this elephant being invited for lunch. I don't know if any of you invite elephants to lunch, but I tend to not. And so what do we do with this sense of wonder? Who said cloud when they close their eyes? So we're on the same length. And we do, with this feeling of perplexity and curiosity, is that we focus our attention on doing what I believe defines us as humans, and that is that we create. Whatever it be, whether it be art, design, science, a conversation, a family, we create. And so what I propose is that we use wonder as a tool. And so you might ask, what on earth is this person talking about? She's already given us technical difficulties. I wanted to be the next president, so that was just what I was doing, right? And so really, where did it all begin? And what I'm about to tell you, most of you will probably think I'm lying. But it's true. I can put my sister on speakerphone and she can attest to it. And where it started, that's me with my mom. So I was born in Miami. Anyone born in Miami? No? Okay, well. I guess not. And I left Miami when I was 20 days old. We were living at the time in the Middle East in Bahrain. Anyone know where Bahrain is? Wow, that's amazing. Usually people are like, what? And we were on the longest commercial airline flight, which went from New York to Manama. It's 14 hours. You can imagine my poor mother had a 6-year-old that was pissed that a sister was born, and a baby that was 20 days old. And my father at the time was working for airlines, so he had access to the gangway. So as soon as the plane door opened, there he was, a lovely Pan American flight attendant. For those of you that remember Pan American flight attendants, they were very nice to look at. Looked at my dad, saw his badge, and said, oh yes, here, handed the basket which had me in it, and then ushered my sister and said, your wife says that she doesn't want to see them for at least 2 days. And so off we went. And so from the age of 7 to 14, I lived in 5 different countries, 3 continents, attended 6 schools, 2 in the span of 1 year. And you might ask why. My parents were a little weird. But really, this person over here, my mother, is the one that had a rule in our house in which curiosity and imagination had a seat at our table, to the point where I think she kind of traumatized me a little bit, because when I went to school, really didn't go that well. But my design journey truly began here. Does anyone know where that is? No? If I tell you, you'd be like, no, I thought that was a beautiful city. That's Paris. Yes, there are some ugly places in Paris, I know. Shocking, huh? That is the Hôpital Foch, which is basically a hospital. I was badly burned 5 days before my 7th birthday. I was taken to Paris with Doctors Without Borders, and that became my home for 3 months. So, I know it's sad, isn't it? But I'm here, it's pretty cool. I didn't speak a word of French. I mean, I could say bonjour, and oh la la, and woo, you know? And croissant, or whatever, which didn't really go that well. And so I had to learn how to communicate without words, which was interesting. And by doing that, I had to observe people. And I had a lot of time with myself and the nurses. And I knew which nurse was having an affair with a doctor, so I could use that to get something. I knew which one was motivated by food, because she ate all my candy at night. I also knew the ones that truly I could communicate with that learned and taught me French, which was lovely. So I learned how to say doucement, which means slowly, and le bassin, s'il vous plaît, which is basically the bedpan. I know, not great, but off we go. This photo is actually not from my room, but there was a ceiling which had tiles. And so I learned to spend a lot of time looking at that ceiling, and I imagined games. What I did was, sometimes I played musical instruments. Each tile became a sound. Other times I played checkers with imagined friends. IV poles make really cool inanimate object monsters. And then other times I imagined flying out of them. They were my way out. And so truly through observation and play, I was physically constrained both by my injuries and also from my lack of speaking French. But I learned that through observation and play, I could create my own experience, I could communicate, I could make people do things, which in a way is the beginning of design. But not everyone likes play. So when I left 3 months later, I went into the world, and as you can imagine, the world appeared to be really crazy. And so I was constantly told when I went to school, don't play with this, don't play with that. Why are you asking questions? Stop drawing answers in the multiple choice tests. No one understands them. And I would say that one of the most difficult consequences of being an adult that I learned at that age was that they tell you play is for children. Don't play, right? In fact, in this country in particular, what is the opposite of play? Can anyone tell me? Work. So you grow up, you play, you have a great time, you imagine, you observe, and then all of a sudden you're told, we don't do that here. But I don't think it actually is a frivolous waste of time. In fact, the lady who responded to Paul Rand, who designed the UPS logo, his whole teaching mechanism was play through design, right? He actually encourages designers to play. However, there's one rule, and this may seem totally crazy because here I am talking about fairy tales and wonderment and all these lovely things and childlike things, but in order to truly, truly play, we need constraints. Why is that? Anyone know? The game has rules, exactly. So with rules, your skills are tested, your discipline is brought into place, and ultimately, what do? You win or you lose, right? So, anyone know what that is? IKEA. Yay, IKEA. Who loves IKEA? Who doesn't like IKEA? One of the memes that I found that I couldn't really put up here was, there was, those funny Victorian-like cards that they take illustrations, and it says, oh, you guys think you're meant to be together. Why don't you go to IKEA and try to build a piece of furniture first and then tell me? Which is true, right? How many of you have yelled at this wrench? So what IKEA did is they're one of the few companies that actually self-impose constraints. They did it on purpose because they wanted to use those constraints to make the designers play and think differently to be able to achieve a goal. Does anyone know which product was their constraint? You've all had one, especially when you graduated from college, because it was like, oh my God, it's so cheap, I need it. Yes. Yes, well done. The lac table. Here it is. Anyone know how much that is? You can see my notes, don't look at my notes. How much? $8.98. So effectively, it costs almost twice than the latte, the small Starbucks latte that you can get at the store, which you might inherently put on top of, right? And so when they told the production designers, this is how much it's going to cost, it's $8.99, obviously people were like, okay, I don't really know what to do with this. And what it did is that it forced them to not use last year's design, right? To not just do the things that they would normally do with table design. And it trickled down also into the production, into the sourcing of the materials. Everyone came together and thought, how are we actually going to make this happen? And what they did realize, does anyone know how they did it? They took a door, a hollow door, and they cut it in half. And then all they had to do was add legs. And they actually beat all of their competitors because no one can make a table for $8.98. 16%, 33%, anyone know what this is? First of all, how many of you have been affected by cancer? Okay, it's a global disease, and it's something that I don't think anyone can really say they haven't been touched with, whether it's themselves or their families or individuals that they love or know or heard of. So in the UAE, 16% of all cancers are breast cancer. But there's a problem. Anyone know what the problem is? Excuse me? Correct. So breast cancer has a 99% 5-year survival rate if caught early. That's incredible, 99%. But in the UAE, most of the 16% was a little late. And why? It's because it's a taboo to talk about breasts. In fact, they call it chest cancer, because both culturally and religiously, it's not really the thing to do. And so obviously the doctors were kind of freaking out, and they were saying, how are we going to get more women to not just come to the hospital, but to speak amongst themselves so they can do their self-breast exams, right? If we can't even use the word breast, how are we supposed to do it? So they hired an agency, which luckily was a good agency, and they gave them that problem. Our goal is to get more women to either come for mammograms or to be able to do their self-exam. But understanding the constraint that you can't really do billboard ads, check your own breasts or things like that, right? So what they did, which I thought was pretty amazing, this is why I want to show you. Anyone know what those are? They're pebbles. So they went to the local mosque, all of them, and when you go to pray in Islam, you have to take your shoes off, you have to wash, and so they put those pebbles in all the shoes that were put in the cubby holes. And so when the women came back from prayer, they go, they're chatting, whatever, and they put their foot. And how many of you had a pebble in your shoe, and it's like, oh, And so inherently what they did is that they picked up their shoe, and they found this pebble. And the pebble said, some lumps are not visible, meaning what you just experienced in your shoe, you didn't even know that it was there. And in the back, they gave them a call to action. Their examinations went up by 33% in a relatively low-cost, effective solution, using the constraint to be able to play, to be able to think, to be able to have empathy, and to be able to truly question what it is that they're trying to solve. So I work at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in the division of philanthropy, which means that I make designs I have a team of 12 people asking and influencing and hoping that people donate to Dana-Farber. Don't worry, this is not a pitch. But if that's kind of what I do. And so we were filming a pediatric research video, and this lovely gentleman that you see, is the sound off? Because he doesn't want his voice to be heard. He's a little shy, even though he's not here. So let me see. Yep. That's Dr. Lauren Walensky, and he's one of our chief pediatric researchers. And so one of the directors of this production company was like, we want to do this interview in this room. It's really cool, the light, whatever, but there's a massive whiteboard. Can you fill it up with science? And I was like, what does that mean? Like double helix, beakers? And no, it has to be relevant. I was like, no one's going to know, but okay. So I asked this lovely doctor if he could give me a piece of paper or something that I could use and copy, and he goes, well, let's go do it together. So this is him, I guess. Not. Oh. Here we go. So anyone know what he's doing? They're what? Yay, someone passed chemistry. Please applaud this young girl. I mean, come on. I was like, what is it? Is that spaghetti? Like, what's he drawing? So I asked him, I emailed him, and he said, yes, of course. And it's like, basically what I was drawing was how we have a bioactive peptide, blah, 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 that is folded into a coil. And he just went on, and he said, that's a spaghetti-like thing I was drawing. They're effectively taking peptides and restructuring them in the lab. I mean, that just blows my mind. You can't even see the cell, and these people are going inside to be able to, kind of what he said here is where we took nature into our own hands, which is kind of scary. But by doing this, by what he said here is the first example of a staple peptide to target cancer-causing proteins that were made over 10 years ago. Think about that, 10 years, has now been optimized as a staple peptide drug for cancer, currently being tested in adult and pediatric clinical trials. 10 years of drawing spaghetti-like structures and not giving up and using that sort of wonderment to be able to say there has to be something within our own selves that we can learn to manipulate. Now, when he said that to me when I saw him, this was my reaction. I was like, I have no idea what you just said, but his humility and his magic and his compassion and his passion to be able to solve a problem is the reason why I wanted to end with him, because for me, if you think about what you do when you add wonder and humility, right? And then you have a smidge of constraints, because for you creative people, whenever you say constraints, we're like, we're free, we don't like constraints. And that's my response to you. Huh? Because you live in this world, right? And you have to be able to love the constraint and use it as a tool along with your wonder. And the reason I use the word humility and not empathy is because empathy a lot of the times is being used. How many of you have heard that buzzword? Empathy, innovation, human-centered design, as Sophia mentioned. I don't despise the practice. I ask, who did we design for before? Grasshoppers? I mean, I don't understand. The wheel was not discovered, it was designed, right? And it was designed because someone probably thought, how do we get from A to B? Let's look at our surroundings. And our constraints is that we don't really have tools. We have what we have. And so then you start to develop. And so when you add wonder and humility and a smidge of constraints, you effectively get design. And so that is I thank you. That's my email. I'm not very good with the social media handles because all you'll see are my beautiful nieces and nephew, my dog, which I don't have anymore, and really abstract sort of things that I find, and then you'll go in the comments and you'll see my niece going, great post. Like, great. Well done. So, thank you for that.